Right, so thank you so much for all your questions and voting on the questions. That's a really good way of getting lots of people engaged with it. So how is Trustings funded is a question for me, I think, because I am the main person that deals with getting the money in. It's a real combination for the Growing Together projects of how we get it funded. So those that have got severe and enduring mental health needs, or that have learning disabilities, who are eligible to a personal budget, or also known as self-directed support, actually charge a fee for that. So we have a fixed fee for lower rate, middle rate and higher rate members, our beneficiaries, and then we charge for a day rate for attending, and that money comes out of social care. It's quite complicated to get hold of the money. Karen's on the meeting and deals with a lot of that. Hats off to her, because it's a lot of bureaucracy you have to go through, but it's worth it because we get a good amount of funding from that route. So it's people that have been assessed with a need, who have a budget for, sometimes it's 6 months or a year, or sometimes it's ongoing, and then we get money that we either charge that person directly or their carer, or sometimes it's from social services, or sometimes it's from a third party like Vibrance or Purple in our area. There may well be in other areas different providers that deal with personal budgets. So it's quite a complicated, but it does work and does get us money. Grants, foundations, trusts, you're going to hear from a couple later this afternoon, are a great source of funding. And the good thing about therapeutic horticulture is it ticks so many boxes in terms of the outcomes. So we've talked a lot about the mental health and the social benefits, but obviously things like crime reduction, loneliness and social isolation, things around education and training and healthcare. So it ticks all of those boxes as well. So I do go to lots of different grant making trusts and foundations. Lottery have supported us very generously over the last few years, and we're hoping that we can get a further grant from them. Corporate partners, if you're in an area with companies that, well, every area has companies, but companies that might have some spare money, either very small ones linking with us or the larger ones. And public do like to donate too, and we also do community events in normal times, so people donate through that route. So for me, I think the resilience of having a community garden, that sustainability that we talked about earlier, is about having a whole range of different income sources rather than being reliant on one, because if one goes, the worst thing to do is to shut a project like this that is sustaining people over the long term, as we heard from Louise. That keeping people well, we don't want to shut it. And if you become reliant on one individual donor or one individual source of funding, and then that stops, which inevitably they do over time, then that's a really big problem. What other questions have we got, Katrina?
The next most popular one is, how do I present an STH project to commissioners?
Wow. Well, commissioners come in many different shapes and sizes and different backgrounds. Health and social care, I know that some areas, I think it's in Merseyside, they've actually tendered out this sort of project, and it's been through a competitive tendering process. Some of them, they don't commission it directly, but others are very keen to, if you make those right connections. I think making the argument, having the evidence, that's why we've been working on things like these wonderful reports over the last few months and years, is to have as much evidence as you can, look at the cost benefit analysis. That's where Jules's work on cost benefit makes a massive difference, so that you can then do that. For me, it's all about building up those relationships with those commissioners as well, finding out who they are. They do somewhat, change at various points. I don't know if any of our friendly commissioners are still on the call. I know we've had a couple earlier. So building up those relationships. Has anybody else got any answers to that? We do have a hand function as well, I think, now on Zoom, which is very exciting, although I can't find that now. So that's my answer on that one. Find them, make friends with them, tell them about it. And the great thing about therapeutic community garden projects is there's a tangible thing to take them to and show them round. Obviously, it's much harder in COVID restrictions, but getting people to meet the real people that benefit from the project is a really great way, showing them round, hearing their stories. Obviously, a good website, good photos, good videos, those personal stories, you know, really get people's heartstrings. And I think, you know, I used to be a commissioner back in the day, remembering that commissioners are people too. So the stats are really important, the evidence is really important, but that personal connection with the project and seeing the benefits for real people really goes a long way too, both with commissioners, grant making trusts, other foundations, that sort of thing, and corporates as well. What's another question, Katrina?
I think the next one is also for you. We've got the next two popular is how do we, or do you have any suggestions for overcoming the institutional inertia in the NHS with their reluctance to get funding from them?
Well, we haven't actually achieved funding from the NHS through Growing Together. What we have achieved funding from the NHS is through Wellbeing Hub and through the Recovery College. So we're actually commissioned now to run those services, which we weren't 5 years ago, but they're very much in line with the ethos and the values of Growing Together. So very much about co-production, that person-centered approach, very much about engaging people in positive activities to help in their recovery and well-being. And it kind of integrates seamlessly with the Growing Together project. So our Wellbeing Hub is actually based at the Growing Together project in Westcliff. And so the Wellbeing Hub team are there. They're able to engage with both the members of Growing Together and with other people that come in, and just having that welcoming, safe environment that Joseph described at the beginning of the presentation, somewhere that people are familiar with, that's non-threatening and non-clinical actually. And we've even just last week we started hosting the physical health checks for people with serious mental illness. That's a big push that the NHS is investing in. So when there was a call out for somewhere to host it, I said, oh, we've got a room, you could use that for a few weeks. And then that brings those people in, those sort of NHS patients, into that space. And once they've seen the space, as Louise described, it really can help people engage with these projects, help lift them out of those dark places and help move them into that sort of point of well-being and recovery. And I think the more the NHS see what we do and engage with what we do, they'll value it more and they'll invest in it more. I'm ever an optimist, but I do think that's true. And I think the more we can prove it, prove its worth, prove that you're a really important part of that system locally. So building up those relationships with the commissioners, the NHS partners, the mental health trusts, just really you become a key part of the system rather than a sort of weirdy little garden on the side. Has anybody else got any other hints and tips? I know there are people. Isla.
We were invited to something called a patients panel, and we took a patient who we took volunteers in our project, and we took him to present to a board of about 20 people and the chief execs from the health board, which was extremely intimidating for everybody. But in one of our projects, we've been struggling for ages to get to be allowed to use a new site because the health board have just tied us up in red tape. And yesterday I emailed the chief executive of the health board and said, look, if we don't get going on this site, we're going to have to give back the money. And he said, oh, I remember you guys, you brought that patient. And I was so impressed with his story 2 years ago. Go ahead, you got permission to go ahead and do the project. So I just think actually everything you've said is really, really valuable. But actually, if you can get your patients, somebody like Louise, to talk directly to the power, there's nothing stronger and clearer than that, I think.
Absolutely, that personal connection, that personal story, getting people in front of the people that make those decisions is so important. Quite hard to do, hard to engineer, but really important. Louise has come and spoken to a couple of things, haven't you, over the years, which is fantastic.
I think the next one is, how can you get people engaged and trying gardening when they seem reluctant to?
Yeah, gardening is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people have an aversion to it. They don't want to get cold. They don't want to get wet. They want to get muddy. And so many of our members at Growing Together don't think they like gardening at all. And we kind of get labelled a bit as that allotment that people don't want to come to. Often, once they do come in, they get over the threshold. They start engaging. They realise how wonderful it is, but also it's not just about gardening, it's so much more, isn't it? It's about that connection with the people, having the lunch together, being part of a group. And actually gardening is just the tool to enabling those sort of that peer support to happen. Did you want to add anything, Louise? You need to unmute.
Yep. I'm not good with this technology.
You're doing well, you're doing really well. Do you want to add anything
what buttons
to that?
Yeah, when can we open the other one?
What another garden?
Yep.
Oh, we're talking about Basildon and we're talking about Canby, so sort of spreading out sort of geographically. It's all about money, isn't it? This is the challenge,
that's the only thing.
Aligning the money with the opportunity. But Keith, our treasurer's there, so we'll be fine. He's put his thumb up.
But yeah, we need to let people know about this, because I don't think there's a few people that know, but there's a lot that don't.
So many people don't know, and even if our main site's been there 20 years, and still people think it's just a big hedge on the corner.
It's not. I've had loads of people say, "What's behind there?" Well, walk in the gate and have a look.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but that's an ongoing, constant thing, isn't it? Communications, marketing, and engagement. It is definitely an ongoing thing.
We need to have our open days back.
That would be lovely, won't it? We do miss our open days, our Mayfair, and all our other events. They were such a great way of getting people into that space. Have we got any other questions, Katrina, before we go
we've
to
still
our
got
break?
a lot.
Okay.
One of the big ones seems to be, is it possible to partner with Grasslinks?
Well, funny you should say that, but we are going to talk about that at the end. There's very much a thing that we're working with AD Trust and others on, which is about replicating the Growing Together model with other partners and other organisations and other bits of the country. So rather than us do it all ourselves, there's only so many sites we can manage and juggle and do ourselves, but we are developing the tools and the systems. Well, we've already developed them, but we're getting them so that they're ready to be shared so that other organisations can utilise those as well. So very much so. We will be following up with participants from today, but if you've got particular, I saw there's a couple of questions of, can I see your assessment tool, or can I see that, can I see that? We're very, very happy to share things. Tabitha, who's on this call, has actually only just started this week, but part of her, a big part of her job is to do that, and Tracy's as well, around partnering with other organisations and the sort of Growing Together replication. So that's fantastic that we've got lots of enthusiasm around that.
I was going to say, one of the other questions, or a few of the other questions are, do you have any advice for smaller ones that are starting up and expanding and things like that, who would probably benefit from the replication a lot?
Very much so. We're very, very happy to work with you, and that'll be a key bit of Tabitha's role, and Tracy very much working with that too. So delighted to be linking with you. Thank you so much for coming today.
I think we've got quite a few about the members, sort of specifically, if we've got time.
Got a couple of minutes, then we need to go on our tea break.
Okay. One of them is, how long do members averagely spend with us?
There's really such a range from just a matter of days or weeks. I think one member started when we started 20 years ago, and they're still coming. So it really is a massive range. I think the average is probably a couple of years, but there's quite a few people that have been there several years, aren't there, Louise? Well, we can't kick them out. This is the trouble. But I think this is it. It's about sustaining well-being and then helping people move on where appropriate. We've got a couple of projects that are funded by DWP Job Centre. I failed to mention that earlier, but they're really great projects because they give people the confidence, the skills, it boosts them, and then we aim to help move them into other training and employment. We didn't really mention the horticulture diploma, but we run a level 2 and level 1 diploma in horticulture, and that gives those people the skills to then go and work in the parks department or go and set up their own business. And it's really about boosting confidence and self-esteem. We don't want people to be reliant on us, but some people, for their well-being, that's, you know, really important that they keep linking in with us. Other people, it could be moving them out into the community and into independence. Any final ones, Katrina?
I mean, there's still a few, so I don't know if it'll be worth maybe me collating them all and emailing out some of the answers, because a lot of them are very good questions. It's things like, why do more men use us than a lot more women do?
Wow. That's an interesting question. We actually, our first evaluation, which was a qualitative one back in 2013, we found that, or we knew already, but the women were saying that they felt it was a particularly male-dominated space. So we actually set up a women's group at our Shoebury Nest site, which is a regular group just for women as a safe space. But I actually think something like therapeutic horticulture is particularly good for men because, I mean, it's a bit like the men's shed concept. We run a couple of community sheds, which are the sort of woodwork projects, and actually having a space for men to come together and chat in a safe, supportive environment is fairly unusual in our culture. It tends to be more women coming together and chatting and maybe even accessing therapy. So we run a carers counselling service, and that is predominantly women. So actually having a space for men to come share their feelings in a safe, supportive environment, but one that is sort of culturally appropriate, is actually a really good thing. But obviously we need to think of the needs of women too, which is why we set up the women's group and continue to sort of do co-production around that sort of area. I think unless, does anybody have anything they'd like to contribute to this plenary? It's been quite a lot of me talking.
Nothing there, Matt. No, I haven't got it.
Without further ado, I'll move us to tea break. So for those that got a pack, you've got a apple and cinnamon tea bag. If you haven't, then hopefully you've got a tea bag or coffee or something yourself.